Hello, Internet. Billy Rothard, aka Rothgar, here with another episode of Deep Listens. This is going to be a special episode. For one, Gino's not here, so no Final Fantasy mystical bullshit will will invade this particular episode. I am joined, as always, by Devin Action Economy DeFrancesco.
Apparently, that's my nickname now. Talk about longbows one time, and then we have to, delve into action economy.
And on the other side of the call, I have John Sticky Fingers Krish.
Okay. I guess that's a nickname. Hello.
Thanks for joining me.
Yep.
So the first things first, if you guys want to get in touch with the podcast, you can hit us up by emailing us at deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com or contacting us on social media by going at deeplistenspod for things like Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. We're also available on most podcast hosting sites, Libsyn, iTunes, Player FM, I think is the name of it, a couple others. So hit us up anytime, leave comments, we always like to hear from you. But today is a special day. We're talking about the kickoff of our Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Woo! Alright, cool.
Woo!
So brief backstory. I mentioned this in a couple of episodes prior to this one. Some of our friends have decided that we wanted to do a little D&D campaign. And for some stupid reason, they thought that I should be the dungeon master of this shit show. And this is going to be sort of a debrief of our first experience and how things went, what worked, what didn't work. We're going to talk a little tiny bit about some of the overarching rules and themes, not rules of the game, but how to make it fun, some themes about how things should be interpreted, and maybe what we're going to do about it. We're going to talk a little bit about how we prepared and how we researched, and we're just going to see how it goes. So in general, we did a test campaign that was real short, like a 3-week long test campaign, essentially like that scene from The Matrix where Neo goes into the training program, and you know it's kind of like the Matrix, but it's like an illusion of the Matrix, which is in itself an illusion. So, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to get you guys feedback on how the first little story arc went, and if we gained something significant from it, even though we sort of washed out most of the rules for that particular session.
I guess I'll go first. Uh, I don't know, it went a lot smoother than I expected. I think everyone in our group, I guess not everyone, Devin has a lot of experience with D&D, but the rest of us had never actually really sat down to play very much. But it went a lot smoother than I expected because turns out like all our video game experience and like playing RPGs actually lends itself well to this. Yeah, I was really surprised with that.
Devin?
So it was kind of an interesting catch-22 of I've played a lot of D&D, but I've played no 5th edition, and the vast majority of my D&D experience is theater of the mind, complete 100% homebrew from my other DM's just brain, just coming up with nonsense on the fly. And I am so unaccustomed to actually having like real rules and not just like whims and fantasies of the DM's brain.
My struggle is finding like a real middle ground between the two. Like I also like to just let players have fun. Just if it seems fun and awesome, just let it happen. Like more fun, the better. But I realize that that's going to get really really hard with some particular characters or scenarios. And what I don't want is for one player to be having like way more fun than somebody else because of some capability that if I just ignore a bunch of rules, their character might be able to do. This happens a lot with spellcasters. Like, can you just throw off 40 spells and not have to worry about spell slots? No, I think that's kind of unreasonable. Spell slots and not having unlimited magic potential probably makes the game more balanced and more fun because it makes the times where you can be super awesome with your spells mean more than just shooting fireballs like a fucking maniac all day with absolutely no cost. But we're getting into it a little bit too deep. We're going to get to all that stuff later. Now, I think the first 3 week arc went really well in response to John's point because there was a lot of prep work that went into it beforehand. Like, it was a really short and sweet 3 week story, but it took a good bit of time to put it all together and make maps and make characters that mattered and put some thought into this. And it took a good bit of work on my end, but also a lot of work on the player's end to know who their characters were and what they were doing. So I think in the sense of the first week, or the first short mini test campaign, our preparation made it work really smoothly, as opposed to just the fact that it was shorter and had less rule intrusion. So the overarching thing that I want to discuss here in this podcast is what are some of the things that we're doing that might be different or unique? Why did we choose them? And how might that impact our play? So I read a bunch of good articles about how the DM should relate to um, the players and the interactions that they have together. And one rule that I want to examine a little bit is to either use visual aids or not use visual aids. So this is going to jump pretty quickly into Devin's idea of theater of the mind. But some people will say, all right, we're going to use miniatures, we're going to use models, we're going to use lots of visual tools. And some people are going to say, no, we're just going to all be on the couch and everything that happens is going to happen in our brains only. I'm not quite sure where I stand right now, but I'm probably going to have to fall somewhere in the middle. And I'm grappling with the idea of how much visual component do I use versus how much imagination am I going to force my characters to generate on their own. So while Devin has the, I guess, most to say about this, I'll let you go first and intro your sort of what you are referring to as theater of the mind and what that means.
So I had previously played with some people on my university campus, and the DM that we played with before was incredibly experienced. He had ran tons of campaigns, and frankly, I don't know why he decided to set himself up for just insane amounts of pain and punishment. But he had run campaigns with like 12, 10, 8 people just like constantly. It'd all be in his head. He would just have everything in his head, be aware that whatever ideas he had were just going to be thrown out immediately because everything dissolved the second players touch it. And he didn't do it with grids. He didn't do it with maps. He didn't do it with anything. He just somehow kept it all in his brain. And as a player, there is the problem sometimes. I think this is one of the main problems of theater of the mind, is that it can kind of feel hand wavy sometimes. Sometimes it's like, how could we have lost? Because a lot of this was not really done with numbers. And I don't remember there ever really being a time where we lost, so maybe that's one of the big issues of theater of the mind. But basically, the way it works is the DM gives a scene with a lot of detail. That's a really important aspect. When you are doing theater of the mind, it is incredibly important to give as much detail as you can about anything that the players would usually be getting from visual aid. I think the less you rely on visual aid, the more you have to rely on storytelling prowess, and you kind of have to let your words paint a picture if you aren't going to actually paint a picture.
So the first thing that I think about is one of the things that we did in our first week of our real campaign. Towards the end, after combat, we went into a council chamber, and I knew what the council chamber was going to look like before I walked us in there, but I had a little bit of a hard time figuring out what I wanted to tell you guys first. Now, yeah, I could have gotten a piece of paper, like I have big grid paper, and I could have just drawn it out, right? But to some degree, I want to have the players fill in some of the details themselves. Like I would put up lots of the architecture, and they would fill in some of the smaller gaps. I want to plug in the biggest holes possible first, and at some point the player's imagination will just naturally, without actually any effort, fill in the little cracks along the way. And so, um, step one, do you think that was achieved in the council chamber scene, which I think is probably the one where I maybe thought about this the most? I mean, I did it in other areas of our campaign, but the council chamber scene was one that I think I was most aware of me having to do this. So do you think that mission, as far as you're concerned, Devin, was accomplished, or was it still wanting a little more?
So I would say I had a bit of it was really easy to describe this to me because I already wanted it. I had kind of been told like what this whole thing was about, and also I'm just a gigantic fan of the Mass Effect series. So I just like kind of had the council room from Mass Effect where you have like all the different races. That was just like already in my head. Like I was just so primed for this description and architecture. So you just kind of I was just already ready
Honestly, I was
for
not
all
even
of
thinking about
this.
Mass Effect at all when I made this scene.
I wasn't saying you were. It's just what came to my mind.
And that's pretty much what you made.
I didn't even think about it. Maybe
Maybe you
I
did
subliminally did.
subconsciously.
Yeah, I might have subconsciously just put Mass Effect scene in there. What'd you think about it, John, overall?
uh, to be honest, like at that point, we'd been going for a while,
Yeah, like three
and
hours.
we are just kind of like wrapping it up. Uh, I don't know. I kind of imagined it as like Congress, like the Senate or something. It wasn't like that grand in my mind.
You would
Um,
think I'd be the one who'd think it was Congress or Senate.
Yeah, you
yeah,
go
I
with
don't
the
know.
fiend.
I don't know. I don't, I didn't really think about that part much. I mean,
Let me
I think
ask a new
when I'm coming,
question.
go ahead.
So the new question that might be a little bit easier is another thing that I'm grappling with, and I'll get your opinion on this first, John, is whether I'm going to use, if I am going to use visual aid, should it be technological in nature or should it be sort of hand drawn, like artsy, like arts and crafts in nature? They both kind of take the same amount of effort for me. So if we're gonna do a visual aid, should it be like a map on a screen or should it be M&Ms on a piece of paper? Because we've been using M&Ms for our for our monsters and player characters, and that's been working kind of fine. But if I put just a slight modicum of effort, I could probably get us set up with like some really nice visual aid maps on monitors and screens and stuff.
Um, I mean, you're talking about specifically like when we get into combat and stuff, or like
Specifically when we get into combat, yes, but I
or
also
do you also
can,
mean like when we go to a new place, like showing us a picture of what it
yeah,
is?
like both.
Okay. Um, I don't think you have to like make anything. I think I think it would be enough to just get like super generic, like, okay, you guys are going in a cave, and just like have a picture of a random ass cave. Like it doesn't have to be like specifically drawn. Like for that council chamber, you could literally take anything. I don't know. I would say you don't need them for like the non-combat stuff. Like if you say a council chamber, everyone's gonna have their own like idea of it. Like I did have like a visual representation in my mind for that whole time we were playing, but I don't think it has to be. Not everybody's idea of what the place is has to sync up perfectly.
Do you think
Like
it's
it's fine to not have an actual picture.
do you think it's limiting the creativity and imagination of the players to provide aids like that, or is it sort of food for thought to maybe make it easier for players to focus on what they care about?
I think I think for kind of like generic locations like that, like we're in a city or just like I don't know, the kind of more generic stuff, just leave it up to us and we'll probably fill it in so it's more uh vivid for ourselves. But then like the spooky mansion or whatever, like maybe a visual representation of that would be nice. Of like, oh, is it just some like old house, or is there some specific aspects to it that should
Is it
stand
a
out to us?
Silent Hill
Yeah,
funhouse of nightmares?
and more like for monsters that we might not know. Like, I have an idea what a troll looks like in my mind, like a big troll, but if you were to say like we're fighting a Yuggoth or something weird that I've never heard of, like yeah, having like a little, I don't know, tabletop simulator figure of it would be nice.
And I wanted to respond a little bit directly to Tabletop Simulator. It's a program that I've been messing around with. I think it's a really great tool, and I'm still trying to figure out how I can make it work to our advantage. Like there are some tabletop simulator ports or mods or whatever you want to call them. I don't know, like custom scenarios that people are just created on the Steam marketplace that essentially set up an entire D&D setup, complete with like dice and players handbooks and um, like grids and everything, like full setup with like notebooks and everything. And it looks beautiful and looks so put together, but does that take away from the human element of playing an RPG like this? I want to get Devin's feedback because um, you and I, just since we happen to live together, are so connected across the media that we share, and we'll have dinner while watching a show, or we'll play games together, or we'll do whatever. But it seems like we're always incorporating a screen. And do you think that the pencil and paper nature of a game like Dungeons and Dragons is going to get betrayed if I use a visual aid or an organizational tool like a tabletop simulator program?
So first, I'll say, going back to the very beginning of our council scene that we talked about earlier, I think if you had given me a visual aid, I actually would have a less cool and creative version of the council than the one that randomly came out from the Mass Effect reference that I had. I think in that situation specifically, in any kind of situation where, I mean, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to roll the dice, I guess, which is a kind of accidental pun. But if you think that the players will come up with a more creative and fun and interesting version of the scene, and it doesn't really matter specifically how in sync all the different player views are going to be, you probably get a better and more natural vision of the scene from the player's brain itself. While if it's something specific and it's really important to the campaign that they get a specific tone and a specific sense and a specific reaction to the scene, then it might be more important to have a visual aid so we're a bit more in sync with each other. I'll say I do really like the aspect of D&D that we aren't using screens. I think that's a really cool thing to do one thing in our life that isn't super screened. But I'll also say that we are playing with a person through Skype, and I think it's really important for all of us, including our friend that's playing with us virtually, to get um, to really be able to integrate with us as much as possible. And it might be important for us specifically with our friend that's playing with us through Skype to have a digital aspect of our campaign, so we can send him a picture in case your voice at the table gives a different effect than your voice through Skype screen and far away and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like there's a way that I could probably make this work to our advantage.
I think
Just
your mic has cut out, Billy.
yeah, sorry, I had myself on mute for a second. There's a way that I think I can make this work to our advantage. So yeah, I'm on board and I agree that we are looking at computer screens and phone screens and everything all the time, and it's nice to find a good reason to get 6 or 8 people at a table together and they're not looking at their phones or their computers or a television screen. That seems awesome to me. Like we're forced to have this creative shared experience. We're all talking about something, doing something together. It's very social, and it's in a fantasy environment, which just makes it an additional layer of cool. But now, in our case, we're forced to break the screen boundary, so how much more can we get away with without betraying the pencil and paper nature? Like I was thinking, like I have a little webcam, I could pretty easily attach it to like my DM wall and just have it pointed at the table so that he can see what's going on, just like everyone else can. Or I could go all the way and say like, hey, I'm gonna have like a little TV on the desk nearby where we're sitting at our table, and it's going to have him on it, and I'm going to have another computer set up with a monitor that's going to have like split screen so that there's Skype on one and like we got a Battlefield on the other, but he's also logged into his Steam account in Tabletop Simulator and can see it in his own real time too. Like there's so much that we can do, and it seems like it would benefit the game from a logistical or like a organizational standpoint. Um, but then I definitely do feel like I'd be betraying the the pencil paper forced human to human interaction of it. So I'm kind of grappling with this myself.
I think given the how social the game already is, I think it's a trade-off. And if we get, I think anytime we aren't sacrificing anything important, we should try to stick with pen and paper. But if we can get any kind of tangible advantage, I think we should go with any kind of digital assists. I think John wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I think it's not such a big deal. Like what you're talking about like, oh, like stop looking at screens, like look at each other type thing. I think it's different when we are all looking at the same screen. Like if it's up on a TV, we're all looking at that rather than like looking down at our phones. Like I think that is almost the same thing as looking at a map on the table, you
Interesting
know.
point. So you think that like because we're not forced to yeah, so if I took away everything, if I took away all the visual components altogether and we went to full theater of mind, maybe that's the only time we'd be able to really achieve this human generated
Which
RPG experience.
which I'm gonna say the theater of the mind description that Devin was giving, I do not want to do that. I feel like D&D is at its core, like it is this creative thing, but like there are rules to it, and if we were doing theater of the mind, it would be like all up to us to be creative 24/7, and if we don't have good ideas, like it's gonna be a boring time. By like being able to fall back on like the more rulesy stuff, it it lets like the game like be creative for us, even though they're like set rules.
I
Like
feel
you,
like
it
it
kind of like
takes
thinks up random stuff for you,
yeah,
kind
I
of.
feel like it takes pressure off of you for not
Yeah,
having to create every detail so that you can spend your actual creative energy on the stuff that matters to you. Like if I can give you guys a skeletal framework that's true not fleshed out, maybe I'll do it theater of the mind wise and just be super descriptive, or I'll provide a very weak visual aid, but something that will set the basic architecture, and then you can flesh it out your own way, and that lets you not have to create from the ground up something in your own head that could be completely different than somebody who's sitting next to you. So, I think we had a pretty good talk about the visual versus non-visual component. I want to jump into another major part of this type of game, which is dice and how much they should be respected. So I've heard a lot of discussion, and in my research becoming a DM, I got a lot of different opinions from the internet, from some players that I've met. Like I was going to my local game store a couple weeks back and just bumped into some guy on the street that I knew from college. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just heading over to this game store. I'm just gonna pick up some D&D supplies." You know, it's like, "Oh really? I also DM. Like, how like when do you guys get into it?" And I struck up a conversation with him on the street for like 30 minutes and got tips from him on how he DMs. And then the game store owner had good tips too. So I've gotten this weird collection of advice on when you should listen to dice and when you should fudge it and just kind of make the story be as cool as possible. So, um, there was a quote I think from one of the devs. I'm trying to make sure that I get it right. I'm just not gonna. Oh, okay, yeah. So here's one of the quotes from the maker, one of the makers of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax, that says, Um, a DM only rolls the dice because of the noise they make, and that obviously takes one extreme to the DM's control and storytelling. But I feel like they're listening to the dice, whether good or bad, can actually make the story more creative. Like, oh shit, someone rolled a critical fail on tying their shoes. Like, what happens now? And it's going to make some of the most memorable moments. And I wanted to get you guys' feedback on when is a good time to ignore dice rolls and say something just happens because you say you want it to happen, or when maybe I roll a dice behind the screen and it's one shy of something really cool happening. I'll just fudge it, and you guys will never know the difference.
You can go first, Devin.
Okay. I'll say I have primarily played in rules light environments, and in those environments, it's interesting. I played in both rules light environments, but also in those environments we had extreme occurrences on critical fails and critical successes. If you rolled a 20, just all hell would break loose on your opponents. It would just be completely insane and ridiculous. And similarly, if you rolled a 1, you almost certainly are going to deal damage to either yourself or one of your friends. And same for the bad guys. Um, I would say we're playing as a group. We're playing to get a story across. We're playing to have an experience together. And while it is very important to me to feel like I overcame a challenge, or as a group we figured some really cool thing out, and I feel like it's important to get that feeling of I did a real thing as opposed to I was going to be handed this no matter what. That's important, but I also do think, just like Billy was saying, if it's close and it would make something cool happen, I think generally fudging the dice is gonna. The dice are less important than the experience. Is probably what I would say. But I also think the Gygax, I might be saying his name wrong. He was definitely in the extreme direction, and you roll the dice to give randomness and variance and to give an even hand across many occurrences. I do think the dice have a purpose and rationale behind them, but the experience trumps the dice.
For me, I would say that above all else, the people around playing should have fun. But with that said, like going rules heavy, I think for kind of like what I am coming to D&D for is the way to go. Like I don't want it to just feel like we were like playing house for like 3 hours or something. I kind of want it to feel like we're playing a board game or a video game that anytime like the story would go in a direction that we don't feel like doing, we can just change the direction. Like that's how I kind of think of D&D, of like this is a game that is very moddable and changeable, variable on the fly, but it is like a board game at its heart, and I think the rules should be followed
Like
as long as everybody's having fun.
I would I would agree with John's point a lot. I think um, that the rules are going to enhance the experience more often than they straight up hinder the fun. But also, I want to reward players for creativity. And so I'm thinking of a couple of examples where maybe a player says, and I think I might have given this exact example to you guys at some point, and this kind of tells how I treat natural 20s and critical fail roll a 1. So when I think about a dice roll that should be taken at face value for sure, the easiest example would be a 20 and a 1. Like, I should definitely not fudge a 20 or a 1. Something cool or interesting should happen. So, if somebody rolls a natural 20 on something, depending on what they told me that they wanted to do, it might not be spectacular at all. It might just happen. But if a player says, you know what, I want to um I want to fight this giant by throwing my spear and then like jumping up its like like it's gonna stab the spear in the leg, and then I'm gonna jump off of the spear and like stab it in the chest when I get a big leap off my own spear. And I'm like, all right, roll for it. Roll an athletics or an acrobatics check. Bam, natural 20. Okay, well, because you were cool and wanted to do something sweet in combat, I'm gonna embellish the shit out of that story, and you're probably gonna get bonus damage, and you're probably gonna get all kinds of cool stuff. But if a player says, yeah, like I don't know, I want to go steal from that guy. Oh, natural 20, and they didn't really give any context or what they might be looking for or anything. When it says, all right, great, you got some gold, sure. On the other hand, somebody says, oh, I'm in a chase scene, and a vegetable cart, you know, rolls in front of me. What do we what do we do? And the guy's like, all right, well, I want to slide under it on my knees, and he rolls a natural 1. Maybe he just did that slide so well, he just slid clear across the street and through the alley and like completely lost track of the person that he was doing. Nothing terrible happened to him. He didn't like die, but something completely unexpected, funny, entertaining, story changing happened. Or a person in combat saying, yeah, like I need to get from point A to point B, but there's a bad guy in front of me. So I need to do an acrobatics or an athletics like to jump over him or like vault over him. All right, maybe you roll a natural 1. Instead of you breaking your neck and your character's dead, maybe your guys get like your sword belts like stuck, and now you have to like now you're stuck back to back for a while until one of you gets untangled. That's the kind of interesting things that I think about when someone rolls a 20 or a 1, and those I'm probably going to follow like pretty solidly. I don't want to mess with 20s or 1s. The gray area comes from everything in between. So the way I understand a DM setting a difficulty check or a DC for any action is the player should say, "Hey, I want to try this," and they describe what they want to do. It's up to the DM to say, "What is the scenario surrounding this attempt? What skill or abilities might come into play? What should the player roll for? And how hard is it going to be?" And I have to like imaginarily set like a number in my head for them to beat, right? So the question that I'm really looking for is, when I set that number, is that going to be in stone, or is it like you roll like around this, we're fine? Like, is that what you guys are thinking about when when you say stick to the rules but have fun the most? Like, what do you think?
I mean, I think setting the numbers in stone would be the way to do it, such that there is the possibility of failure and succeeding. It's just knowing what number corresponds to like how likely are they going to succeed, which I think the DM screen has like a 15 is like moderate and a 20 is hard. Like it has those descriptions. So
I
And it
was
does.
thinking maybe and maybe this is going too far and me thinking about it too much now, but I was thinking maybe a way to keep it not get a situation of like we feel like we're winning every time we're doing something cool. Maybe if you ever do have to say, all right, well they were off by a point or two, but this is really cool and I want this to happen. You could lower the bar, but then on some other situation, you can maybe raise the bar a little higher to compensate so we don't feel like we keep winning all the time or something. Maybe you could do like some luckomancy and,
Luckomancy.
to take some number from one and add to another somewhere else or something. I don't know.
I feel like the dice rolls, how set in stone they are probably going to be based on like you were saying, like you want cool things to happen. So like if somebody gives a cool description of what they want to do and they describe like more intricate on like how they're going to do it, like even though it's hard, maybe set the roll difficulty lower because they were creative about it and you want them to succeed. But like if someone isn't, like sometimes you just aren't creative. Like the chance of success should still be there because just because I wasn't on my game doesn't mean that something cool can't come out of it.
And I think this will show up a lot in when we do out of combat stuff more
Yeah,
than in combat stuff. Like let's say you're because a lot of conflicts can be resolved without rolling initiative, you know? Like I look forward to the time that you guys just talk yourself out of a fight
that's not gonna
and
happen with our group.
I know
Everyone's a freaking murderer.
um I don't know. I'll give you guys some opportunities at least, but if you like, I think it's going to be exactly how you said, John. Like, if somebody from the group steps up and gives a speech in front of a council or in front of a lord, and that player speaks through the voice of their avatar and makes a compelling speech, that DC is going to keep dropping and dropping because I want them to have a higher chance of this working. If I have this fail just because a dice said so, it would just like shatter the gameplay experience to me. I mean, even me as the DM, like I want to be able to respond to a player being creative by rewarding them in response. But, you know, I also can't I also can't ignore things like critical ones and 20s.
Well,
So this is
maybe the way to do this and stick with the rules is to just do that inspiration thing like more often, like for that type of stuff of like, hey, you did that well, get advantage. Don't have to just make the number, just some trivial number, but you get two chances. That's way
yeah.
better.
I think another thing we could potentially think about, I don't know the rules implications of this, so I might just be totally wrong here, was maybe if someone is really convincing and already has a decent, maybe they're already trained in persuasion, or they have a decent charisma score or something, or it just makes sense that they would win in this situation. You might have them, even if you have them roll to check for a 1 or a 20, you might have a like they have this much just from the way like they have a passive in the same way you have
Yeah.
passive perception, perhaps passive persuasion, and even if they rolled not really high, you might say, well, you may have done like not a great job of that, but your passive persuasion or whatever was high enough or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's definitely something to consider, and I think that's a good point of view. I'm just worried that if I honor ones and 20s and everything else becomes susceptible to a gray area, I just don't know where I'm gonna draw a line, you know? So it's hard, but it's something good to think about, and I think that over time, if we do another check-in D&D session, I'm excited to see how our relationship with our dice, being one of the most decision driving aspects of a game like Dungeons and Dragons, how our relationship is going to change and evolve over time.
Yeah, I definitely don't ever want to get into a situation where I feel like it was a feeling I did have in the some other groups I've had before, and it was a bad feeling that there wasn't a chance of failure. I don't want that. I want this to be I don't want it to be, mind-numbingly difficult or anything like that, but I want it to, I don't want us to all roll badly and then just win because we're supposed to win this one. Yeah, the game we should actually be playing a game, but you know, occasionally you can fudge the game rules in pursuit of the narrative, but the game rules shouldn't always be fudged. I think it should be a rare, maybe like once a set. You probably shouldn't fudge the rules more than once a session, or maybe another thing is that we should never know.
Yeah.
We shouldn't realize that the rules are being fudged. That's probably the more important thing. It's less how often the rules being fudged. It's probably more, do we feel like we're constantly getting away with it, or do we feel like we're playing a game and we've gotten lucky a couple times?
Which the more we talk about this, the harder it is for us to not feel that way.
Yeah.
True. I mean, it's going to be up to me to make it
Yeah.
convincing, and yeah, I think we should one jump to a new topic for the podcast,
Yeah.
but also be careful with how much we discuss fudging the numbers because it is going to
Yeah.
start taking away from the experience. I want to make sure that you guys know that your decisions are going to matter. There's always going to be a chance for failure. Is it going to get somebody killed? Probably not, but it could massively change the arc of the story. And, it could have, I shouldn't say real world consequences because it's a fantasy world, but there will be consequences to successes and failures. So we'll leave it at that for now. I want to jump into another topic, which is the relationship between player and DM. So, um, first of all, we're all friends, right? Like, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
We're all
right.
friends, but everyone calls me a spike, which is a magic term for, and maybe the D&D term. I don't know if I actually will identify as this yet, but the D&D term that people use try to refer to me as is min maxer. You might be more familiar with that term.
So
Also
the
known as scum of the universe.
woo,
Not really.
But
um,
really,
so the 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 like a cardinal rule that I've heard many players say is above all else, don't be a dick. Don't be an asshole to your players. There is a good relationship that players can have with their DMs and that DMs can have with their players. And it really depends on how the DM is running the game. Is the DM trying to create a world that is a gauntlet of horrors and traps and nightmares that their players have to try to survive? Sure, some players are really into that and they're looking for that kind of experience of there's some deity that's trying to kill me and I'm clinging to life every chance I get because there's always going to be some bullshit trap or monster to kill me. And other DMs are tools to create a world and facilitate fun and help sort of essentially to say I as the DM are just supposed to rationalize the player's actions in a world that I have made and set rules for, right? So the relationship between player and DM is trusting a lot for both ways. And so far, I think that I've done as much as possible to make sure that I'm not an antagonist, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, you know, should I be throwing crazier challenges at you, or should I just be letting you guys roam like off the leash almost entirely, or like how do you guys feel the flow has been so far?
I mean, not this last session we did, but the previous one, the end of our like mini campaign, like that final fight, like that was tough, but like I don't know, that was a cool fight because of it.
I think that you guys, the players, are gonna start coming out of your shells more, and I certainly hope so, because I put in a ton of work for the the amount of depth that I've created so far, and admittedly, I think that looking back at what we've done so far, I've put in way too much work for this point. Like I probably fleshed out like 5 or 6 cities, and we've barely even gotten to our first one. Like I probably have put in too much pre day one work, but I hope that you guys get more comfortable with being creative and exploring and pushing me and testing me and seeing how much I've prepared because I hope, with the exception of asking about someone's dad, um, uh, I hope that you'll be surprised with how much I've fleshed out a world, um, and how much I am just going to be a facilitator of you guys doing cool stuff. So first, I think Debbie should explain what I mean when I say talk about a dad. So someone's dad.
so honestly, I thought you did a great job of that, despite having no preparation whatsoever. Basically, we had this NPC who was supposed to be, he had a knight heritage, and we started probing into his backstory way more than Billy could have reasonably anticipated. Um, so I I think Billy has a bit of an advantage compared to maybe other DMs. I think he has a natural, um, off the cuff ability. I think he has a lot of improv background. He's actually been an actor before. I think he's just really good at all that stuff, and he's making faces at me. Anyways, what's really important about this is I think that another thing is that I think we have enough shared media uh, within our group. We've played a lot of the same games. We watch a lot of the same shows. We eat dinner out a lot. And I mean, not saying that other campaigns don't do that too, but I think that Billy probably has a pretty good idea of what we're looking for and expecting. And so I think while maybe he has gone out on a bit of a limb and prepared a little too much, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it is stuff that we're actually going to be interested in exploring.
And getting more towards the DM being an asshole or not, and touching a little bit back on the rules discussion that we had, like there has been some times, and we're definitely not going to get into it now for the sake of brevity, but where we as a group have kind of disagreed on maybe how to interpret something or how something should be played out. And like I said, I want to be a facilitator of fun, but what's going to happen when we clash on a rule set and I'm just going to have to make a call and maybe you guys don't like it? That's actually kind of, I mean, a little bit terrifying because I don't want to, interpret something or see a particular rule or see a scenario that I firmly believe should go one way. Not like putting guys on railroad tracks for the narrative, but deciding a particular rule interpretation. Um, one that we talked about that we came to a good conclusion about was that no one's going to have to keep track of how many arrows they have. We're just going to say that people are just going to have arrows. You're never going to have to go to a town and make sure that you buy arrows so that if you use a bow, you're going to have plenty of arrows in your quiver. Like, no, that's awful, I think. Keep your track of that, like, inventory minutia. We came to a pretty easy agreement on house ruling that in. But what about something else that's not such a easy cut and dry scenario?
Like
You know,
action
when am
economy.
like action economy? Like when am I gonna have to be firm about something when it might cost fun? And maybe I'm taking that leap of faith to say that maybe I'm costing a little fun now, but if we don't, it's gonna get too bonkers in the future.
I think one thing that's really important on this is any complex rules checks probably need to not be handled in the middle of the fight, in the middle of the campaign, in the middle of the session. They really need to be handled between the player and the DM on their player. For example, I'm currently playing as a Moon Druid. Billy and I we haven't really done this yet, but we really need to just handle, before I'm thinking about combat, before I'm thinking about which animal. I didn't explain this. As a Moon Druid, I can turn into an animal. I can only turn into certain animals though. So I think Billy and I kind of need to figure out before a combat, before a session, all that stuff of what I can and can't turn into. Because if in the middle of the fight I'm like, oh, there's this really cool animal that I could turn into in this specific scenario, but then Billy's like, no, you haven't seen that. That's gonna feel bad because I've like thought about, oh, this weird mechanic this animal has, I can take advantage of it. But if we've already handled that before, I won't be thinking about it and using mental energy and have planned out my turn to do this. I'll already know that that's something I haven't seen, and we'll have a way to rectify that. So I think a lot of it can just be handled by proactive DM player rules discussions.
Yeah, I think like short discussions, but like I think final word lies with you, Billy. That's the only way to do it, I think.
Um, I like having everyone's opinion, and we've created a little bit of a forum for this in our particular group. We made like a Google Doc, and right now I'm using it as a forum to like make comments and suggestions about what might be house rule and what might not be house rule, and eventually like it's going to be the case that hey, if it's in the doc, like that's essentially our like constitution of what our DM group is going to be, and maybe I will have to have just the final say on stuff, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with doing that, and I feel like in most cases I'm just going to favor what seems to maximize making sense and having fun. But I also do agree that maybe not so much here, but especially in a group where maybe you guys, the players, are not as close or in a more mixed group setting, you just kind of have to respect the DM a lot. That's going to get into my next point because usually the DM is going to put in so much footwork and so much effort that, and they don't get to play really. They have to build this whole world, and they really don't even get to enjoy it the same way as the players do in many, many cases. You kind of have to just I mean, don't like let the DM win, but understand that the DM is putting a lot of thought and energy and sacrificing a good bit to make this all happen. So respecting their choice on something is going to be pretty important. And I think Devin had the right point of saying, if you're going to talk about something, talk about it after the game. Like, just make a note about it, talk about it after the game, and bring it up outside of the session. Because I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that nobody wants to sit and talk about, like, a rules interpretation for 30 minutes while everyone else is just kind of, twirling their pencil. That's
Only
not fun
I
for
do.
anybody.
We
Yeah,
all know
Devin
that
does.
only Devin wants to have this thing, so Devin should just accept that the will of the group is to not do it.
All right,
This is why we can't play Munchkin. That's what's really important.
last time, no, it's because Munchkin actually has a rule set that is made of like paper and holds no water. There's so many holes in Munchkin rule set. Last topic that I want to bring up, and then we'll be totally done. Preparation. How much is too much preparation for a campaign or a particular session? Like, I know right now in the story, you guys have 20 directions you can go. This is the very, very beginning of the campaign, and I have no fucking clue where you guys are going to set off after you finish maybe your first objective. And I don't want to put you guys on railroad tracks for the whole time, so I know how much I have to prepare. What are some of the things that you guys are either trying to accomplish? How much thought have you put into your character backstory, or how much you've related to the world? Um, some of the other players have given me a long list of like what their character's all about and what they're looking for in the world. And some of you are just like, yeah, I like to steal shiny stuff. How much are you going to try to write your characters into the narrative? And this isn't really putting you guys on the spot, but just in general, how much of this should happen versus how much of it should be completely improv and just flying by the seat of your pants?
Devin, you should go first. I have to think about this.
So let me add one more thing. I'll just say, while you guys are thinking, um, I definitely overprepared for our first session. I definitely overprepared because I had one, like we only touched one city and barely scraped the surface at that in our first real session. And I fully filled out the NPC populace for 6 cities. I have a PDF document right now that's almost 80 pages long, full of NPCs that I had to create. And yeah, I used like a tool. I had a lot of tools to help me create the world, create NPCs. There's like wonderful tools online that help you generate some of these things using some random like components. But I probably prepared way too fucking much for this session. How much are you guys thinking about before we set the first step into the campaign?
So also, one thing that I want to do more is I want to get more in touch, and I haven't really gotten a chance to do this because we've only had one session with this character so far, but once we've had a few more sessions, I really want to think more, not about what Devin wants and what Devin feels is important, but I really want to get what my character thinks is important. I think that's the kind of preparation that is really important. In addition to knowing the rules, in addition to getting the tone and the feel and all that, I think one thing that's really important is trying to figure out what your character's motivations are and think prior to coming into all these situations where you're flying at the seat of your pants, you should think, what might my character do in this situation? What might my character do in this situation? And try to come up beforehand of what your reactions might be. I think that might give a way that you can be more authentic to your character, so you're not just kind of ad-libbing it and going with what you want to do at that moment. That's definitely something that I personally have a problem with, because I want to think about what I want to do when I'm a player, as opposed to what my character wants. But another thing is I've been reading a lot of like really cool things that happen in D&D. Like I've read a lot of things online about really cool things, and some of the coolest things that I've seen and one of the most interesting stories are times where characters made choices that their player probably didn't want to make. Their player probably actively didn't want to do it, but they did it anyway because they felt that's the choice their character would make. One that I read was the DM gave a character a choice to like be exiled from this place or be like permanently staying there forever. And clearly, the choice that made the most sense for the player was be exiled from the place and be able to, adventure literally anywhere else. But it made a lot of sense for that character to actually just stay there. So they just said, all right, fine, I'll just sacrifice this character for a really cool narrative and have this like be really cool in this scene, and then just roll up a new character. That might be kind of an extreme example.
Yeah, that is kind of extreme, but it's not too far off of what I was thinking about. Like, how much are you going to think about before we set the first step out onto a new week of campaign? How much are you thinking about what's happened so far and what might happen in the future, and where your character might go and what your character's goals might be or might have changed?
So yeah, like for me, what preparation do I think I should do? Like for me, my character I created such that like I have motivations so that if I am in situations, I can like act and role play this character and like they would have certain ways they react to things. But like I don't want to be the one creating the story. And this kind of goes back to our previous topic of the relationship between the player and the DM. And I think as a player, it I kind of think that it's the player's job to show up and play a character, but like they are visitors in the DM's world. It's not like the world is based around them. So like as far as preparation goes, like I just know how my character would react to stuff, but I don't think there's much to do besides that. I don't know. And there's a lot of not to weight the scales like so heavily in the DM side of like all the prep work they have to do. Like I think there's a lot of tricks that you can do as a DM to not have to prepare like every city storyline of just prepare one and be vague about what the cities are about and just whatever one we ended up choosing could be the the one city storyline you prepared. Like, and as long as we don't know that, it feels like a real world.
I've definitely given that a lot of thought. Is how specific am I going to be before things have actually happened, and how fluid I'll need to be after they start.
Yeah, I think you're gonna end up doing a lot of work that we might never get to. Like you said 6 cities worth of people. Like, what if we just stop after the first city storyline? Like, that's a lot of wasted work that, I don't know, that could have been done when we were on the road to that city.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is the fear of the unknown for me, because I think the the worst feeling that I've had so far, the least fun that I've had as a DM or doing this altogether. I guess there's two situations that I think have been the least fun, and it's when I have to grapple with a really hard rules decision, and it could be seriously influencing the rest of the game or the rest of a particular mechanic interaction. That's like the least fun thing for me. But then also, what was not fun was when I felt unprepared for when you guys asked me about that random NPC's dad and backstory. Yeah, that was probably asking too much to have me have like their lineage understood fully in a practice campaign session. But I realized how much it sucks when you guys are being cool and exploring a particular thing, and I just don't have the material ready. So I was afraid week one going in saying, shit, like what if they just don't do anything that I had planned for in the city and they just start walking west? And like what's gonna happen? Like I tried to make sure that I had some way to make something work on week one, no matter what you guys did. And yeah, that took a lot of prep. I don't think I'm going to have to put in that much footwork ever going forward. And yeah, I did roll like 70, 80 NPCs, but I used like a generator tool to help me a lot. So like, I didn't have to like set all their abilities and stats. Like, all I had to do was essentially write like a 3 or 4 sentence, like, what's their name, what do they want, what do they fear, you know, kind of stuff. So yeah, I had to put in a lot of work. You guys might never ever experience that or find that side quest. Like I'm putting side quests into our campaign. Like you guys just might not hit any of this stuff. But I'd rather have it fleshed out and there for you guys to find than you guys try to dig deeper and you find out that it's just like a shallow, hollow world. You know what I mean? So any other thoughts right now about week one so far or how this might be playing out? I think Devin, you had something else you wanted to
Yeah.
go for.
One thing I want to talk about is what do you think is the player's responsibility towards the narrative? Because I think specifically in our set of people, we have one person who's like a lawful, neutral vengeance worshiper, and we have a bunch of chaotic good people who probably just don't really care that much about. We have people that want to steal things. I really care way about more about nature than society's laws. Like, how important is it for the players to maybe, despite what their characters would do in role playing wise, to like keep up group unity and make sure people aren't at each other's throats and make sure that we're not, clearly going way off trail. Like if we can very clearly see where you want us to go and we don't think it's stupid and dumb and we haven't clearly made it apparent that we don't want you to do this but you're doing it anyway. Like do we kind of have a responsibility to not just go west and just, go like 100 miles west and say we don't want to do your campaign, Billy. We're just going to go west, deal with it. Like what do you think is the player's responsibility both for group cohesion and sticking to not being uncreative and getting on railroads purposefully, but not being insane.
Yeah, um I think that's a good question, and I think my knee jerk reaction is there's a shared responsibility of me of for, first of all, it's my responsibility to create a world to explore. And then it's your responsibility as the player to maintain a character that makes sense, right? So your characters are gonna have motivations and desires and fears and stuff, and I hope and I would expect you to sort of honor those and make decisions based on that, as opposed to it'd be fucking funny if we just all went 5 different directions and now Billy's gotta write five. Like I mean, in one session, you guys could just say, all right, pick a cardinal direction, scatter. Like that would just one destroy the game, two make it unfun for me, and I think nothing would be accomplished. There would be no fun. So yeah, there is a responsibility and an expectation that the players need to be considerate of the DM, but also like themselves and their other like their friends' time. But then I have a responsibility of if you guys do want to be creative and do want to do something weird, I have to rationalize how that makes sense in the world. And I might then in turn put the responsibility back on you to say, make this make sense. You want to do this with your character? Why? Like, how does that benefit your character, your PC? And I might make it really difficult for you to get from one point to the next. I might make it really hard for you to do something that I think is doesn't make any sense for your character to do. And maybe there's going to be a time where I might step on your toes a little bit. But if you don't give me a good reason for why, um, maybe your character would decide to set fire to a forest for some reason, like maybe that could be the most spiky cost benefit analysis best choice to make, but I would say, why would you do that? Explain to me your character's motivations, and I might hold you to the fire and say that if something doesn't make sense, why would your character do that? I'm not gonna roll with this narrative if it if it's not. I can't say not real, but if it would not obtain, like if this is not gonna make sense narrative wise, why would we do this? I'm not on board, and in some cases, I might have to put back railroad tracks to get us in some way on track. But then again, you could always just tell me to fuck off, and like there's where we get this dissonance. I wouldn't know how to really deal with that right now.
I
You
think
have
it,
anything? Yeah, John.
yeah, I think it kind of comes down to like we're all like we're all friends and we're there to have a good time together. Like, just don't be an asshole that is gonna roll a character that in character everyone hates. Like, just don't do that. Like, if you want to play an evil person, talk to everybody. Do a campaign of like, hey, we're evil people. We're gonna create like a supervillain group. Like, you can do that, but it doesn't. It's just, yeah, disrespectful of people's time to do that. But also, like, we have backstories for our characters, but they're not so deep that you can't just insert like an extra reason like why these group of people would be friends. Like, I I kind of work that into my character of like I might be a thief that wants to steal stuff, but like I just made my character a friendly person. So I'm going to go around with these people.
Similarly, I'm a druid who eventually has this noble heritage that I need to follow up on and see what's up with that. But I also have never left a forest type community where I've been in before, and the place that I'm eventually going to is like a proper city. If I just go straight to a proper city, my character wouldn't really know what to do. So my character's kind of interested in finding themselves. And the in game they're about roughly the equivalent of age 20. They have this noble heritage they want to follow up on, but they also want to figure out, who they are now that they're not in the forest anymore. So it makes sense for them to go on adventures and quests and stuff like that.
I think overall this is going to be a really good examination of um of who we are as storytellers, each of us. Of who we are as players in the true sense of pieces on a board, and how do we fit into this grand narrative? How do we fit into this grand scheme? I'm excited to see how you, the players, will respond and interact with the world that I've created. And I'm interested in seeing how I will respond to you guys throwing monkey wrenches into things because I didn't plan for some contingency of you guys wanting to do something. I think this is the stuff that I really am excited about. And the stuff that makes me not excited is rules checking and making calls and having to do all this prep work and book work, and in some cases it makes me think, God, why didn't I just pay $20 for like a campaign book and this is all just done? But then I think I wouldn't be able to get this kind of experience from you guys, my friends, of us creating a narrative together. If I had bought one of those prefab book campaigns, and they're perfectly fine, but there would have been something lost to us collectively making this world ourselves. So that's one of the motivations that I had for not just going out and buying a prefab D&D campaign, even though this has been incredibly difficult and a little bit stressful for my first DM experience and making all this myself. So I'm excited. I'm still enthusiastic about this, and I hope that we're going to have a lot of fun adventures together. So, On that note, I got nothing else. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts on how the first sessions went, or just any general, um, final words on what we're doing here, or what you guys are excited about for the future?
I will say I am excited to get more into my character and to get entrapped in the story. Right now, I'm getting too distracted by rules questions and bothering Billy about them, and hopefully he doesn't get too annoyed with all my rules questions, and we get to find a peaceful medium on the rules, and I can get into the story and the ideas and the concepts. We're only a session in, so rules mean more to me right now, but hopefully the story will take me, and then I'll care more about that in the rules.
Uh, for me, I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun. I never have actually gotten to sit down and play D&D in person. I've always done like I've made like 8 characters. I've maybe done 4 sessions, but I've never sat down and done like a second session. So this is exciting for me that way. And also, if once we get deeper and I'm more familiar, I'm thinking about maybe borrowing your DM book and then maybe start crafting my own stuff. We'll see.
And I would be excited for that so that I can start playing.
Right, right.
And me, and this is not like a cry for help. Like I need to play because I'm doing I think what I do best in our friend group, which is be the person who initiates a lot of the the story
Decision maker.
decision maker.
I'll
Yeah.
say I'm really excited for like mini holiday sessions where one of us DMs and you get to play, and it's some world that no one is super attached to. So if it goes up in flames, and we are a super villain group and just murder the Elon Council instead
Oh
of doing
my
what they want.
god.
I think it'd be great to just have a world that everyone's just so okay with being shit on, and also like a really hard world where we just all die, but it's okay because it was just a one session adventure. I'm really excited for things like that. I think that could be a really cool, in addition to getting really into one story that's cool and cohesive, and we have this fun thing. I think taking a break and having a breather of something where it's really serious, we're thinking about our allies and all that kind of stuff. I'm really excited for a one-off Halloween session where everything is really actually trying to kill us, and you are an antagonistic DM for real, and we're all gonna die. It's just how long can we survive? Things like that. Not that we specifically do that, but just weird one-off things. I think that could be really cool.
That stuff sounds cool. Like as we're more familiar, we could roll characters faster and like start at higher levels such that 1 or 2 session things would be easier to do.
I'm definitely looking for every opportunity to put more responsibility on you guys and less responsibility on me because I have a world to run and I can't be thinking about rules so much. I mean, I should be thinking about rules, but I
It's
think it's a little
this is
bit
just
clunky
weird.
right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is just weird because you don't have that much experience.
I think this is
Yeah.
just going to get exponentially more and more fun the better and that's going to sound dumb, the better you get at it, the more fun you have, of course, right? But I think the more and more we're going to get comfortable with our rules and the flow, like we're just going to be able to flourish more and like cultivate more. And that's just going to make it just tons more interesting for me and for the players.
Yeah, I think the rules questions will, in a couple sessions, should go down.
Yeah, it should probably vanish
Yeah,
almost
almost. Yeah,
entirely.
I totally agree.
So that's going to be all for tonight. I'm tired. Um, if you want to get in touch with the podcast, this is gonna wrap up our very first sort of post D&D startup check-in. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit about the inside of what this faction of the Deep Listens crew and some of its frequent special guests are doing, and maybe I'll convince Gino and Pete to join us for a session or two. We'll see how they respond to a Billy created world where now I'm in control. We
There are
haven't
so
even
many
we
collectibles.
haven't even gotten to the collectibles yet, guys. We haven't even gotten to the collectibles.
It's ironic
talk
that I'm
about a
playing a
talk about a
thief, but I'm just gonna say I'm gonna walk right past them. But guess I have to
You
collect
you
them.
can't, John. You
Yeah,
can't. You're the
I
you're the
guess that's my
player that
character.
cares about
Yep,
collectibles.
You are
yep.
Billy's hopes and
I
dreams.
really
I
screwed myself
I
over.
bet you didn't think about that, but you literally built a character that was like, oh, I'm just into like
Yeah,
collecting cool stuff.
damn, damn.
You're
Get
gonna have so many
destroyed.
hood ornaments.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So that's it. If you guys want to get in touch with the podcast, hit us up at our email address, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on social media, throw some comments, send some feedback. All of our handles are at deeplistenspod. You can also just directly write a review or make a comment on like our iTunes or our Libsyn or our Stitcher, any of those places that we're hosting the site. And with that, yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Thank you very much, Devin.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited every time I get to go on this podcast.
Thank you very much, John.
What Devin said.
Deep,
Hmm.
powerful, moving. And thank you, listeners. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And till next time, peace.